channel. Welcome back to Personal Finance at the University of Houston. I'm Jim, and this is Personal Finance 16 September, year of our Lord 2025. It is 10 a.m., and that means it's time for another lecture in personal finance. Today, we're going to talk about uh, first memories of money. So let me just jump in here and we'll get started in just a minute. But here we go. This is, if you look in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, we're not streaming currently to X. I'm going to think about maybe starting to do that again. I canceled my premium membership at X, but I may just have to put that back in place. Anyway, if you look in the comments, in any on any platform that this is streaming, you'll see a link to this post. So that's this is one of the resources for today's lecture that you may want to look at. It really just highlights some of my ideas about first memories of money. First memories of money is a kind of a chapter in my book, Make Your Money Count. And so today, this week, we're going to focus on first memories of money, and your assignment for this week is to do a parental interview. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, let's talk about the secret class collaboration. This is the conversation that is not listed anywhere else. This is just my way of making sure that you're watching the lectures, which, believe it or not, they are required. Many students don't watch the lecture and they miss some of the important information that is part of this course. And then they send me an email and ask me the question. And so you are required to watch the Zoom. And we're going to do the secret class collaboration conversation where you get an opportunity to comment and share your thoughts about a topic. Today, I'm going to give you an option, two different topics you can comment on this week because I've thought about this week. I'll just share. Um, I'm sure you've heard Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and that is a massive tragedy. In my opinion, it is one of the biggest losses in our country's history. He's a young man who stood for a lot, and he was very outspoken. And I admired him in his life, and I just wanted to take a minute. Now, the reason that I'm saying you have an option, I know this is somewhat potentially political or maybe inappropriate for personal finance. And since I'm teaching personal finance at the University of Houston in the Bauer College of Business, I try to never overstep my role and I try to keep everything focused on personal finance. And so I struggled with whether or not to even consider making Charlie Kirk and his assassination a topic for this week's class collaboration conversation. So, what I've decided to do is leave it up to you. If you would like to comment on Charlie Kirk's assassination, maybe if you knew him or followed him, what he meant to you, I would appreciate reading your comments. And if you would rather not, then you get to comment on something else. We'll talk about, well, the other optional secret class collaboration topic is loan forgiveness, student loan forgiveness. So a couple semesters ago, I started talking about, or really thinking about student loan forgiveness, and it's been fascinating to me. I guess this is another one of those topics that could be considered political, but it certainly has to do with personal finance. And so, student loan forgiveness is something that has been a thing, something that has been talked about in the political realm for some time. Usually, it is the party that prefers to give away everything. And then there's another party, and I'm not going to tell you which one, that is more about personal responsibility. And so, socialism, communism, uh, the government being the source of all your needs in life, that is one extreme. And the other extreme, and neither of them are perfect or good for sure. But anyway, that is the optional class collaboration conversation. What do you think about student loan forgiveness? Is that something you would be for, something you would vote for? And if so, just share your thoughts and your opinion about that. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's get started, and I'm going to jump right back in here, and we're now looking at the post. So again, in the comments, you'll find a link to this post. And this is just really to set the table for you to think about your first memories of money. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. And then I'm going to help you prepare for this week's assignment. This week's assignment is a parental interview. So we will be setting the table for that assignment. I think I'm going to jump right in there and say, oh, there it is. That's me in my studio here in Friendswood. I'm playing with things. As you know, this is my last semester to teach before I take a sabbatical. So I'm going to be taking a sabbatical next year, and I'm playing with my studio, and that's what you're seeing there. Okay, so now let's jump on in to, let me get rid of that. Uh, I'm going to get everything set up. Okay, here we go. We've got this week's uh, content on the screen. So let me see if I can get all my buttons correct. So we already covered class collaboration discussion. You have two options. You can talk about Charlie Kirk and his assassination and just share what do you think about that? How do you feel about Charlie and what he stood for and the ideas, if you know Charlie or knew Charlie or followed Charlie? I would love to hear your comments. Or you can talk about student loan forgiveness, either of those. First memories of money, we're going to spend a few minutes on first memories of money. And I just want to set the table and help you know that um, your first memories of money are really important. They impact you more than you may know. Now, one thing I've learned along the way is that folks who are younger have less, I guess you have less perspective about your first memories of money than an older person would have because you're not as old. So when you get older, let me get here. When you get older, the older you are, I think, this is just my opinion. It's not based on a lot of research except my own research. And that is the older you get, the different your perspective is, the more it changes over your lifetime, especially about when you were young. Those early memories become somewhat more significant. They become you see them differently than you do kind of when you're young and still close to those memories. So when the reason I'm telling you this is because this week's assignment is for you to interview a parent or a grandparent, not a roommate, not a sibling. If you submit your assignment interviewing a sibling or a roommate or a friend, you will get a 0, not a 50, not a 20, not a 30. You'll get a 0 because this is a parental interview. Now, you can interview a parent, you can interview a grandparent, you can interview an aunt, an uncle, but you really need to, the purpose of this is for you to get to know a little bit more about the kind of the DNA, the financial DNA that's built into your family. So, the purpose of this interview is really for you to learn from a parent or someone in your family who you look up to, who you respect, who you think can help you gain some perspective about how you think about money, about how you've been shaped and formed and conditioned with respect to how you manage money. So, your own first memories of money are super important in this week's assignment. But what I really want you to do is take a step back and look at someone else's story and try to connect the dots so that you can see how important these first memories of money are and how they carry on through your life. So, that's really what we're going to focus on for the next few minutes. Your behavior in terms of how you manage money is impacted a lot by your first memories. And that's what you're going to, I think, I hope, I believe. Typically, what happens is when you do this interview, you're going to see that in someone else's life. And so, my hope is that you can see it in your own life and then begin to make some decisions, some choices to not let some, if you um, have been conditioned in a certain way. For example, uh, a lot of bad habits come from your first memories of money. And you'll read some stories this week about some folks whose first memories of money shaped how they behaved throughout their whole life. And some of those behaviors were not very productive, not very helpful. And really, truly, some of those behaviors are just plain painful. And so I want to help you learn to avoid and just be aware of how some of your first memories of money can impact how you behave in terms of how you manage money. And again, when you do the interview, you're going to see this in someone else's life, and hopefully it can help you be more aware in your own life. So that's what we're going to continue to talk about. Your attitudes about money are, uh, think about, so money is a resource, but it's more than that. It can be a real, uh, it can really define what motivates you, either on the fearful side or the greedy side. But money is, it's part of life, and so your behavior with regard to money and how your behavior, what you do, is often influenced by what you think. And so if you're not, if you don't know what your feelings are and your attitudes and your inclinations and your propensities, for example, I like to spend. I know a lot of folks, and I've worked with a lot of folks over the years who find that spending money is like therapy. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you're like that. Maybe you find that spending and having more, it just has a way of changing how you feel that day, kind of like chocolate pudding or uh, other things. So just be aware that your attitudes about money, the way you think about money, will influence what you do with money. And so if you're like many people in America and you're influenced by your feelings, uh, how you feel about money is a very important feeling for you to just take a look at. So let's do that. Let's do that this week. Just be thinking about, how do you feel about money? What are your attitudes about money? What is your first memory of money? If you read in Money Study Group, you have plenty of content to read this week. And one of the things you'll be able to read if you want is my first memories of money. I shared my own first memories of money. I shared my Uncle Hank, who has passed, but my Uncle Hank's first memory of money is one of my favorite stories. It's more than a story, but I hope you'll read that and I hope you'll learn from it. And I also hope that you'll take what you learn in reading these assignments into your experience in this interview this week, because it will, again, be very helpful. Okay, so childhood memories are really what we're talking about. Uh, it, The way I start most meetings, not always, but the way I used to start every meeting with a client, with a new client, so a prospective client, someone who I've met, maybe it's the first time I met, or as a financial planner, it's the first real meeting that we're having to uh, really decide whether or not we're going to work together. In that meeting, we call it professional money managers or financial planners, financial advisors. We call this first meeting a discovery meeting, and it's really just a meeting for the professional to ask some questions for the client or the prospective client, the person that we're meeting with. It's an opportunity for them to learn about what we do as professionals, but it's for the professional. The discovery meeting is designed to really get to know what's important to the person who we're interviewing. A lot of times it's a couple, and it's one of my favorite parts of the business of being a financial planner is that first meeting, the discovery meeting, because you get to learn a lot about someone, just like you're going to learn a lot about the parent or the person who you decide to interview this week. So a couple of things I want you to think about. One is the person who you decide to interview this week is a choice that you get to make, okay? And that choice that you make about who you're going to interview speaks volumes about the person who you chose to interview. Now, I know some of you are already thinking about who's the easiest person you can tap into to get this assignment done. I get that. That's kind of how I did college. It was like the easiest route was always the number one route. But I know some of you really are you're uh, thinking through what you're learning this semester about managing money. And it's meaningful to you. And I know that because you're sharing that with me. And I appreciate that. So, for those of you who care enough to think through who you're going to interview, I just want to mention, I want to make sure you understand the significance of that choice. Not only do I want you to understand it and think about it, but I want you to communicate that. In other words, I want you to, come up with some words to say to the person that you're going to interview. I'm hoping, this is my words, this is how, by the way, I approached my uncle Hank when I did the interview. Now, he's my uncle, and back then I was genuinely curious because Uncle Hank, he was the guy in the family who, not just the family, but the whole clan, he was the guy that we would go to for advice. Okay. When I first got married, I took her to meet my Uncle Hank. He lived in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And Uncle Hank, when we came home after that, trip, anytime there was something big in our family that required some thoughtfulness and some wisdom, my wife would always say, Connie, my wife would always say, what would Uncle Hank do? And so Uncle Hank was that guy, and that's who he was as I grew up. And so when I became a financial planner, he was one of the people that I really wanted to tap into in terms of his wisdom. He was clearly the most successful guy in our clan and our family. And the reasons for his success were pretty simple. And they're basically the ingredients that I'm trying to pass on to you in this semester. But I interviewed Uncle Hank, and I set the table by asking him this question that I want you to ask when you do your interview. And I asked him, I said, what are your first memories of money? Maybe it was your first paycheck. Maybe it was the money you got under the pillow from the tooth fairy. Um, I don't know what it is, but what's your very first memory of money? And so that's what I want you to ask. And I want you to think about that for yourself as well. It's part of your assignment this week. Your own first memories of money, as well as in the interview, you're going to ask that question. And so it's going to be a meaningful question. Let me jump down here and see if I can. Hold on. Let me get rid of that. And there we go. Okay, so um, first memories of money can give you some deeper insights about your own behavior. That's the point. And when you do this interview with a parent or an uncle or a grandparent, remember you're not doing it with your roommate, you're not doing it with a sibling, you're not doing it with a friend. But when you select someone to interview this week, you're going to have the opportunity to learn from them. And they may not have thought about their first memory of money. Most of the folks that I've interviewed over the years, especially if it's a couple, it's a fascinating experience. But one of the things I learned and discovered and was kind of interesting is that most of the time when I met with a couple and I asked the question to him and then I asked the question to her or vice versa, they had never heard, they didn't know those first memories of money. And so it can be a tremendously helpful resource to have that insight. And that's part of what happens in the interview. Childhood memories are, they're somewhat, for most people, they're pretty powerful. They stay with you and they shape you. So again, that first memory of money, maybe it's the allow, I don't know about you, but I never really got allowance. I had to grab my when I wanted something. In fact, my in the chapter in my book, Make Your Money Count, chapter of first memories of money, one of my first memories of money was uh, I had my mom would go. We had four siblings at the time. Currently, we have five, but when I was growing up, we had four. When I left home, just about the time I left home when I was 16, my mom was pregnant. So she had our most recent, anyway. So when I was a kid, though, like around, I don't know, I guess I was about uh, 9 or 10 maybe, but my mom would go to Kmart. Now, Kmart is, there aren't very, I don't even know if Kmart's in business. I don't think it is anymore. But back in the day, Kmart was like Walmart. It was a cheap place to go. And my mom would buy canvas Converse tennis shoes. And we had a choice between high tops and low tops, okay? But the canvas tennis shoes were $4 a pair. And that was what my mom would buy. And she would buy them every, few months because you know what happens to canvas Converse tennis shoes after you wear them a lot and get them wet. They get to be, they stink. Anyway, at the time, Dr. 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 J, Dr. Julius Irving. He was a basketball player and he was Dr. Dunk, I think. I can't remember. But anyway, he endorsed these leather Converse tennis shoes and I really wanted them. All my friends had these tennis shoes. So I went to my mom. Somebody's knocking at my door. I might have to pause. Hold on. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. All right, I'm teaching a class online. Thanks. Okay. So sorry about that. Let's see, where were we? Let's go back here. So it's the pool guy getting the pool worked on at the house. I'm so sorry about that, but he was whistling, knocking, and I couldn't continue without dealing with it. So sorry about that. So anyway, my first memory of money, back to the tennis shoes. Uh, I really wanted those leather tennis shoes, and my mom said what my mom would usually say, ask your dad. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, these tennis shoes, can we get those instead of the Converse canvas tennis shoes? And my dad said, well, I'll tell you what, Jimbo, he said, we spend $4 on those tennis shoes. And if you want the leather ones, they cost $10. So you got to come up with $6 and you're welcome to have those tennis shoes. That's how that's one of my first memories of money. And so the way that that shaped me, the way that that uh, influenced my life is pretty significant. And here's why. Because my dad said, you can have them, but you have to pay the difference. And initially, I was a little disappointed by that until my dad said, at the time, it was winter. And I lived in Lansing, Michigan, and we had a big snowstorm. And my dad said, hey, here's a snow shovel. And he let me borrow his snow shovel. He said, if you break it, you have to replace it. But he said, take that snow shovel, go down the street, knock on the door, and ask the neighbors if they want you to shovel their snow, their driveway, their walkway, whatever. And so I'm like, hey, that's a cool idea. I'll give it a try. I was a big kid. I was like 9 or 10, but I was a big, hefty, husky kid. I wore husky pants at the time. You can tell I'm still a little bit husky. Man, a lot husky. Anyway, back to the story. So my dad gets me a snow shovel and he tells me how I can go knock on doors. He like gave me permission to go make some money. And I did. And I came home that day with a pocket full of money. In fact, I had a couple of friends and everybody, not everybody, but a lot of folks wanted their driveway and their walkway shoveled because we got a lot of snow. And this was, I think they wanted to help the kid in the neighborhood who was willing to knock on the door and ask. They were nice people and they paid me very well. And I ended up with a pocket full of cash and some friends who were willing to work with me, and we split the money. And I became, based on that Converse tennis shoe experience, I not only got the shoes that I wanted, but I ended up with a pocket full of cash. And from that day forward, and for the rest of my life, really, I pretty much always had money. And I learned how to make money. And so that's one of my first memories of money. I have several, but it's when I asked my Uncle Hank his first memory of money, though, it was a very different story. And I want you to read that and understand a little bit about it, but because it was one of the most impactful stories. And I don't know, I don't know that we want to spend. Let me just share. Um, well, let me just go through the rest of my stuff here, and then um, if we have time, if I wrap it up soon, I might share Uncle Hank's story. But anyway, the first memories of money, a lot of times it starts with your first paycheck. My wife, Connie, her first memory of money was her first paycheck, which was at Catfish Parlor. She actually, not Catfish Parlor. It started at Bill Miller Barbecue in Austin. So my wife grew up in Austin, Texas, and she got a job at Bill Miller Barbecue when she was just, I think she was 15 years old. And she took her first paycheck and she had her eye on these leather boots at Dillard's department store. And she bought those boots because she really wanted them. And she used her first paycheck to buy those boots. And so when I asked my wife her first memories of money, her first memory of money, that was her story. It was her first paycheck at Bill Miller. And she bought these boots. And these boots turned out to be cool. They were cool. She liked them, but she wore them and she enjoyed them the first time she wore them. And then it was like she felt like, why did I do that? I spent most of my paycheck on a pair of boots. And she, from that memory, and my wife is gotta be one of the most frugal human beings on the planet. Like, she doesn't really like to spend money and she doesn't value more stuff. And anyway, that was her first memory of money and it stuck with her. So for the rest of her life, and I can tell you this as being married to her for 35 years. No, wow. I We were married in 82, so I guess 30, a long time. I've been married to her for a long time. She's the one who's frugal. I'm the one that likes to spend money and buy stuff, but she's very frugal. And that first memory of money, when she looks back, when I look back, when we think about what shaped her, that was one of the things that shaped her. And so that's how it works. It's kind of interesting. I think it's interesting. I've always been interested in psychology and sociology, and that first memory of money turns out to be kind of interesting. So let's talk about the impact. The the way that your first memories of money, the way you were conditioned, it sticks with you. Okay, it sticks with you. And I am gonna share um, a little bit about Uncle Hank's story because when I asked Uncle Hank his first memory of money, he shared with me that his first memory of money was when he was very young. He was he came home from school and his father was at the kitchen table and he was crying. Hank said he'd never seen his dad cry. That was the only time in his life he ever saw his dad that emotional. And what had happened is Uncle Hank lived on a pig farm. They raised pigs. And every year they would have a broker come to the farm and give them a bid on the stock, the pigs, and they would pay or they'd write a contract and then they'd take the pigs. And this year, this particular year, when Hank shares his first memory of money, he came home and his father was very upset, crying, because the broker, the person who came to purchase the pigs for the entire year, like this is the paycheck for maybe more than once a year, but it was like a big deal. And this guy came and he took the pigs and he gave a contract and he absconded with the money. That was the word my Uncle Hank used. He didn't pay. He defrauded them. He didn't pay for the pigs and he just never was heard from again. And it was a huge financial hit for the family, as you can imagine. And that was my Uncle Hank's first memory of money. And so when we talked about his behavior, it was a beautiful day in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We went for a long walk together in the country. And I was just asking him and having this conversation, and he shared his first memory of money, and that was it. And he started to share with me how his he was so frugal. Like my Uncle Hank is like my wife Connie, just super frugal. Did not spend money, very frugal, very industrious, smart, everything you could hope for. He was entrepreneurial as well, but he just didn't spend money. And he told me that that first memory of money shaped the way he thought about money and the way he behaved, and it made him very so frugal. He told me it made him so frugal that he would withhold spending money even when so at times he could have spent his money to create memories and do things with his family. He had plenty of money, but he felt like he was restricting himself and his family from experiencing the kind of life that they deserved, that he wanted for them. But because of his fear, because of his ultra frugality, because of that first memory of money, he wouldn't do those things. He would save the money, and he did save a lot of money. So anyway, at that point on that walk during that conversation, my Uncle Hank kind of made a declaration to me. He told me that he wanted to buy some property on the lake, Barren River Reservoir, beautiful lake in outside of Bowling Green. And he told me he was in the process of buying this property, and he was going to build a lake house. And that is, in fact, when I talk about the Kentucky Lake House, it is a fantastic, amazing, beautiful place, and we've got to make so many great memories there. But that was a result of my Uncle Hank, not because of my conversation with him, but he had come to the conclusion in his own life with his wife, my Aunt Lorraine. He had come to the point in his life where he knew that he'd been blessed in an abundant way, and he wanted to make different choices with his money, and it was difficult for him. And he told me that it's difficult. It's hard to spend that kind of money and have that old way of thinking about frugality, because he was afraid, as from way back as a child, he was always afraid that what happened to his father would happen to him. Someday, somewhere, disaster would strike. And so that's my Uncle Hank's first memory of money helped me really, and this was early on in my career as a financial planner. And um, before I wrote my book, Make Your Money Count, that was the opening story. If you look at the book, I don't have a book handy, but anyway, that's a story. That's Hank's story. And I hope you'll check it out. Uh, okay. And by the way, do subscribe to the channel at Jim Munchback. Munchback has an H on the end. This is my last semester to teach, and I want to share in the weeks ahead what I'll be working on during my 1 year sabbatical. But I do want you to know that it's going to happen here on this channel on YouTube. I'm going to have lots of playlists, lots of different projects going on that I'm excited about. But I'm going to have something special for you if you're a student at the University of Houston, or if you're a past student, you're going to want to hang around and kind of stay in touch. If you're a YouTube user, then do subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you a cent. And hit the like button. That helps the channel, and I appreciate it. So, a little commercial there. All right, let's see. Back to uh, now, I want to jump into the next thing. Really, before we wrap it up, I want to prepare you for the interview. So, your family interview, parental interview, remember this is either a parent, an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, but it's not your roommate, it's not your friend, um, and it's not a sibling. So if you turn in your assignment and you interview one of those, you're just going to get a zero. And I'm going to say, go back and watch the lecture, because we did talk about that. So I want to prepare you for that. Again, I want to make sure you know the person you select. It's very important. It's your choice. You get to decide. But I hope I hope you will set the table by letting them know that your assignment this week is to do an interview with a family member, an older family member, a parent, aunt, uncle, or grandparent, to learn from them and gain some perspective from their life experience and how they managed money. And if you choose someone like I chose, I would have, if I had to do this assignment, I would definitely have chosen my Uncle Hank, because he would be the guy that I'd be like, Uncle Hank, you've done a you've done amazing. You're very successful, and I'd like to learn how you did that so that I can try to replicate that in my life. To do that, I didn't do that. I wasn't a student back then, but for you to set the table in that way, I think would demonstrate a good deal of gratitude about that person, for that person being in your life, and your respect for them. It would speak volumes. So I want you to take advantage of that opportunity to set the table in that way with this person that you're going to interview. Um, I do also want you to understand, as you conduct the interview, that I want you to be prepared for the possibility that it could be it could be awkward. It could be maybe somewhat painful. I mean, when Uncle Hank shared his story about his father, it was painful. And so Just be prepared for a conversation that may not be all rainbows and unicorns. And so, as you prepare for that interview and you actually conduct that interview, I just want you to be prepared and don't be afraid. Don't, just be there, be present with the person that you interview and listen. That's your job, is to listen and ask a few good questions. In your assignment, you will see the questions that I want you to ask. And you can ask other questions. Good follow up questions are always great. But try to ask the questions that are listed, especially the first memory of money question, and some other questions that are in there are pretty helpful. In fact, I think I have a list of questions to ask. What is your first memory of money? Obviously, and I'm hoping you will interview a married someone. Just if you do, these are good questions. Typically, that's the way it works. If it's a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, they were married, they are married. Hopefully, they're still together. But it's a when you have a relationship, when you're married, money becomes a thing. And part of the value of this interview is to understand how a couple made decisions about money together so that you can learn from them. So anyway, those are some of the questions that you can ask in this assignment. So let's see. To wrap it up today, the summary of this lecture is first memories of money. I want you to learn how to connect your first memories of money with your current financial behaviors. It's a really helpful exercise to become more aware of what's influencing your behavior. The interview will help you do that as well. So I want to wish you the best of luck. I want you to spend some time and reflect, not just on your first memories of money, but as you do the interview, I want you to think about how their first memories of money impacted their life as well. So I think that's pretty much it. Uh, First memories of money in parental interview. I want to say before I wrap it up today that I am behind on grading and I will get caught up this week. Yesterday was September 15th, and September 15th is a very important tax day. So, as a financial planner, and wealth management. My company, Bayrock Financial, I do a lot of work in the area of tax planning. And so we had a lot to do. Uh, Yesterday was a key day and a lot of deadline stuff. So, anyway, that's my excuse for not having graded all of your homework assignments. But I will get caught up, and I want to remind you again, if I can find the early assignment. I'm looking for my early assignment screen, but I'm not seeing it. There we go. Let me see if I can get that to play. So, as we wrap up, I want to remind you one more time that early assignments are 20% increase. Like instead of 50 points, you'll get 60 points, up to 60 points. And so if you're sitting there wondering what your grade was for last week's assignment, because I haven't graded it yet, I want you to know every student who turned their assignments in early by Friday at 3 p.m., those assignments get graded like top priority. Okay. Doesn't mean you're not a priority. Doesn't mean that I don't have an obligation or responsibility to grade your papers in a timely way in your assignments. And I, again, apologize that I've gotten behind. But I do want to mention all the benefits that come with turning your assignment in early. It's my way of trying to incentivize you to be an A student, to have an unreasonable advantage in this course. It's part of my attempt to help you understand that when it comes to managing money, if you wait until the last minute, it is very expensive. And it costs you in ways that are, uh, well, over your lifetime, it can be very expensive. That's all I'm going to say. So, turning your assignments in early is just basically a small little habit that I'm encouraging you to take advantage of, and I'm giving you incentives to do that in this course. But it's really not about this course. I couldn't care less if you get an A, a B, a C, but I do care about you learning the things that you need to learn to be successful financially in your life, because I think that can make a difference in your life. I know it can. And so, managing money, being successful with money, becoming a millionaire by the time you're 50, which again is not a huge accomplishment when you think about inflation and the value of $1 million today or by the time you're 50 compared to when I was your age. Okay. To become a millionaire, have a net worth of $1 million by the time you turn 50 may sound like a big deal, but it's really not. However, if you want to do that, as opposed to being buried in debt by the time you're 50, you need a few basic disciplines in your life. And that's what this course is about, to teach you those small things that you can do that will help you build the big muscle that you will need to do the big things that you can't do without the little disciplines that will develop the muscle to help you accomplish the really big things. That's my definition of discipline. It's the little things you can do that will help you build the big muscle that you absolutely have to accomplish the really big things in your life that you could never accomplish if you didn't build the muscle to do them. And the disciplines are the little things we can do to develop the muscles to do the big things that we couldn't do without the muscles. So, turning your assignments in early, it's just a little practice thing that you can start doing in your life, not just for this course, but in life in general, and it will pay off big time. I'll see you next week. I'm going to go check in with the pool guy, make sure he's doing a good job. Uh, it's the first time we've used these folks. My pool guy retired, so we had to find someone else. So that's why I apologize for the distraction today, and I'll see you next week. Have a great week.